There's a moment that doesn't look like anything from the outside. No dramatic conversation, no big decision, no one watching. It's just you, maybe in the car after dropping someone off, or in the shower, or lying in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling. And something in you goes very quiet. And in that quiet, one thought surfaces, one you've been pushing down for longer than you can remember. This isn't who I am. Not said with anger, not said with certainty, just said, quietly, to no one, to yourself. And if you've felt that quiet refusal lately, that specific wordless sense that something has to change, even if you don't know what yet, that's exactly what this video is about. Because that moment, that quiet, unremarkable, completely private moment, is the moment she takes back control. Not the moment after. Not when she acts on it. Not when anything changes on the outside. That moment. Right there. This video is about what happens next. Taking back control doesn't start with strength. Every version of this story you've ever seen, every montage, every transformation arc, every before and after, shows you the strong version, the decided version, the version that already knows what she's doing. But that's not where it starts. It starts in the middle of still being lost. It starts when you're still showing up for everything you're supposed to show up for, still being who everyone expects you to be, still performing the version of yourself that keeps the peace. And underneath all of that, something has started to quietly refuse. Not loudly, not dramatically, just refusing. A small, persistent, inconvenient refusal to keep pretending that this is enough. That refusal is not weakness. That refusal is the first act of taking back control. And most people miss it because it doesn't look the way they expected it to look. This video is for the person who has been holding everything together for so long, for everyone else, in every room, in every relationship, that they've quietly stopped asking what holding themselves together even feels like. If that's you, you're in the right place. And I need you to stay with me through this one. Let me tell you what losing yourself actually looks like. Because it rarely looks the way people describe it. It doesn't usually happen in one event. There's no single moment you can point to and say, there, that's when it happened. It happens in accumulations. It happens the first time you swallowed something that needed to be said because the timing wasn't right. And then the second time, and the third. Until swallowing things became so automatic, you stopped noticing you were doing it. And sometimes, if you're honest with yourself in the way most people never quite manage to be, the disappearing wasn't only about love. Sometimes you disappeared because being fully seen felt more dangerous than being invisible. Because if no one ever saw the real version of you, no one could reject her. And that felt like protection. It wasn't. But it felt like it. It happens when you started reading rooms before you entered them, scanning for who needs what, adjusting yourself accordingly, becoming whoever the situation required, softer here, quieter there, more agreeable here, less complicated there. It happens when your preferences started to feel like inconveniences, when what you wanted became the last thing considered. When you got so good at accommodating everyone else that you forgot accommodation was ever a choice. And here's the part that makes this so hard to recognize while it's happening. You were doing it out of love, or out of fear of losing love, which in the beginning can feel like exactly the same thing. But at some point, love stops being the reason. At some point, it just becomes the only way you know how to exist in a room. And that's when the real danger begins. Because now, you're not just accommodating people. You're disappearing. Quietly, completely. In a way that looks from the outside like being a good person. And the most terrifying part of all of this, the part that took me the longest to understand, is that nobody around you notices. Because you're so good at it. Because you've made your own disappearance completely invisible. The people who love you most are watching you vanish and calling it strength. This is self-abandonment. And it doesn't come from weakness. You didn't lose yourself because you were careless. You lost yourself because you cared too much. Because keeping the people around you comfortable felt more urgent than keeping yourself intact. And you were so good at it. So consistently, impressively good at making yourself smaller, that by the time you noticed something was wrong, you couldn't quite remember what the original version of you felt like. That's not failure. That's what happens when a person has been loved conditionally for long enough that unconditional self-acceptance starts to feel like something they haven't earned yet. But here's what I need you to hear. You don't earn yourself back. You remember yourself back. And that remembering has already started. It started the moment something in you refused. There's a specific experience that I think is one of the most disorienting parts of losing yourself. And it almost never gets named. It's looking at your own life and feeling like a stranger in it. Not in a dramatic way, not in a crisis way. Just this low-grade, persistent sense of, I don't quite recognize this. These choices. This version of me that moves through the world. And the disorienting part isn't even the estrangement itself. It's that everyone around you seems to recognize you perfectly. They have a clear picture of you. They relate to you with complete confidence. And you're standing inside that picture thinking, that's close, but it's not quite me. This happens because the version of you that the world knows was built collaboratively, over years, shaped by what people responded well to, what kept things peaceful, what made you easy to be around. And everyone got comfortable with that version. They organized their entire relationship with you around that version. But the version of you that exists underneath, the one with the specific preferences and the things you've never said out loud, that version has been waiting. Not patiently, waiting with increasing urgency. And that urgency is what you've been feeling. Not as clarity, it rarely arrives as clarity. It arrives as restlessness, as a low hum of dissatisfaction you can't quite locate, as the feeling of being slightly out of step with your own life without being able to explain why. That restlessness is not a problem. It's the version of you that got left behind, knocking. And what I want to tell you next, the part about what happens when you start to change, is the part most people aren't prepared for. Because it's not what you expect. And if you leave before we get there, you'll miss the one thing that explains why most people stop right at the edge of coming back to themselves. Now, I want to tell you something that most people going through this are completely unprepared for. And it's this. The people who love you have often unknowingly built their lives around the version of you that lost herself. Think about what that means. The relationships in your life, the dynamic with your partner, with your family, with your closest friends. Those dynamics were established with a version of you who said yes when she meant no, who showed up when she needed to stay home, who made herself comfortable to be around at the cost of being comfortable herself. And the people who love you aren't villains in this. Most of them had no idea. They just got used to you, the way you were, the space you took up, or didn't take up. And when you start to change, when you start remembering yourself, when that quiet refusal starts becoming a quiet reclamation, something happens that nobody warns you about. The people around you feel it before you've said a single word. They might not be able to name it, but something in the relational atmosphere shifts. And some of them, the ones who are most comfortable with the version of you that kept herself small, will push back. Not always consciously, not always unkindly, but they will push back. They'll say you seem different lately. They'll ask if you're okay. They'll wonder what's gotten into you. They'll miss the version of you that was easier to be around, not because they're bad people, but because that version asked nothing of them. And this is the moment most people lose the thread, because the pushback feels like evidence that they were wrong to change, that the refusal was selfish, that the reclamation is causing harm. And so they fold, they go back, they shrink themselves down again into the shape that kept everyone comfortable. And something in them quietly breaks. Because now they know. They know what it felt like to begin. And they chose the old smallness anyway. And that knowledge, that specific knowledge, is heavier than anything they carried before. Don't fold. What's happening is much simpler than it feels in that moment. The people around you are experiencing the adjustment of a relationship, shifting into something more honest. That adjustment is uncomfortable. Discomfort is not the same as damage. You are not responsible for managing their discomfort with your wholeness. Read that again. You are not responsible for managing their discomfort with your wholeness. And if you go back to shrinking after knowing this, if you fold now, it will cost you more than it ever has before. Because now you know. And knowing changes everything about what the smallness means. And I want to tell you exactly how this actually starts. Not theoretically, not eventually, but in the ordinary, unremarkable moment you're already standing in. Because the way in is smaller than you think. And that's what we're getting to next. Here's the part of this nobody tells you. Taking back control is not a single moment. It's a series of very small, very quiet acts that accumulate into a life that actually belongs to you. It's the first time you say what you actually think instead of what will land best in the room. It's the pause before you automatically say yes. That one beat where you actually check in with yourself before answering. And that beat, that one small beat, is everything. Because in that beat, you exist again as a person with preferences rather than a function with obligations. It's choosing not to explain yourself when you used to always explain. Not because you're being difficult, but because you're slowly learning that your choices don't require a defense. It's the moment you stop editing yourself before you speak and let the unedited version take up a little space. And some people in your life will not like this version of you. Not because she's wrong, because she's real. And real is harder to manage than small. Some relationships will stretch uncomfortably. Some will end. And that loss, as painful as it is not evidence that you made the wrong choice. It's evidence that those relationships were built on a version of you that no longer exists. And here's what nobody tells you about this part. It's going to feel wrong at first. Not wrong like you made a mistake. Wrong like wearing your own clothes after years of wearing a costume. Unfamiliar. Slightly uncomfortable. Like a muscle that hasn't been used in a long time being asked to hold weight again. That feeling is not a sign you're doing something wrong. That feeling is evidence that something real is happening. None of these acts feel like control. They feel like vulnerability. They feel like risk. They feel like standing in a room with no armor on and waiting to see what happens. But that exposure, that terrifying, necessary exposure, is what reclamation actually feels like from the inside. The version of you that kept herself small felt safe. Control doesn't feel safe. It feels like the first day of something you don't have a map for. And here's what I want you to hold on to. The discomfort of becoming yourself is always, always less than the suffering of remaining someone you're not. Always. So where do you actually start? Not theoretically, not eventually. In the ordinary, unremarkable moment you're already standing in. You start with one true thing. One thing that is genuinely, actually true about who you are. What you want, what you feel, what you need, that you haven't said out loud to anyone. Maybe haven't even said to yourself clearly. And you say it. Somewhere. To someone. Or just to yourself in the quiet. Not everything. Not the whole reclamation at once. Just one true thing. Because here's what I've come to understand about the inner rebirth. It doesn't begin with a decision. It begins with an honesty. One small, private, terrifying honesty that cracks something open just enough to let a little light in. And then another. And then another. Each one slightly less terrifying than the last. Each one making a little more room for the version of you that's been waiting. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to have it figured out before you begin. You just have to be willing to tell the truth, starting with yourself, about who you actually are underneath everything you've been performing. That's the moment. That's the control. That's the rebirth. Not the arrival, the beginning. And if something in this video has been quietly reorganizing something inside you, if a part of you has been sitting with these words rather than just hearing them, then you're already in it. The moment has already happened. You just have to be willing to follow where it leads. Before you go. The fact that you stayed all the way to here tells me something about you. It tells me the version of you that got lost isn't gone. She's been here this whole time, listening. Waiting for someone to finally talk about her like she matters. She matters. Not the version that keeps the peace. Not the version that makes it easy. Not the version that everyone got comfortable with. The real one. The complicated, unedited, still figuring it out one. That's the one that deserves the life you've been building for everyone else. If you're in that quiet moment right now, if something in you has already refused, you're not behind. You're not broken. You're not too late. You're right on time. Take care of yourself. She notices.